Before we dive in, support the Middle Ground Mike on Patreon for just $1.50 a month. Get early, exclusive access to content and help us keep finding the middle.
Great.
All right. Good evening, everybody. What if America's decline isn't inevitable, but a turning point towards something great and we can change the world? Hope everybody's doing well. Welcome back to the Middle Ground Mike. We got a great guest with us today. His name's Evan
Jaqua.
He's got the founder of the Solutions Party, and, he's got a plan for building a better America, which will benefit everybody, not just Americans, but I would say the whole world if we're doing better. Go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody. Let us know, what you're all about.
Okay. All right. Well, I truly appreciate this invitation. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. I just would like to kind of give you just a very brief background. I've actually spent most of my life overseas. I lived in Japan many years. I got my degree in Japan. I'm currently spending most of my time in South America. I lived in China. And one of the great things about that, besides learning about the different cultures and the different languages, is that I've been able to see the world from a lot of different points of views. I've had a lot of opportunities to talk about different ideas and the problems that people around the world and even throughout history have confronted. And what I have found in exchanging ideas is that there's a lot of commonality, not only in ideas to make things better, but in the problems that we're all facing. And so the website solutionsparty.org is sort of a summary of these ideas, broken into basically four categories: one about political and government reform, economic reform, ideas to address certain social problems, and then ideas for a better world. And the idea is not to impose these ideas, but it's just to start a discussion. I welcome everybody's feedback. Challenge me, and let's have a rigorous but civil, respectful conversation, and let's make things better. So I could go into some of the basic ideas of the Solutions Party, but I don't want this to become a monologue. So I'm going to give you your chance to ask any questions.
Part of I know a lot of people say per se America's decline.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
So when you kind of talk about America's decline, so I see America's decline as more of the dominant currency. I don't see us being a lack of a dominant economy for a while, if that ever happens, just because of how our system is set up, the things that we've established. And I think other, big countries like China and India over time, I want to say wealth, right? But their standard of living will come up over time. It took us 250 years to get to this level, and China is technically maybe 60 years old or so, their current, structures.
Government.
Yeah. And so I guess that's kind of how I look at our decline to a point. I know a lot of people are like, well, we need to go back on the gold standard. That'll help increase our standard of living. I said, well, the reason why we went away from it is because we couldn't get enough gold to back up the money.
Right.
So,
right.
To me, I would think of a copper or a silver, something of that nature, even platinum. But, in today's day and age, everybody's talking Bitcoin. And I believe, and this is kind of what I'm getting to with the decline point, but Argentina, I believe they use Bitcoin as their national currency now, or they base their currency off of it. I forget which one of the two, but they were at 1,000% inflation, and I think they're down to 100% now.
Yeah, the Argentinian president has taken some severe austerity measures, which, by the way, I've lived in Peru for many years. That's what President Fujimori did too. They had, unimaginable inflation. 10,000% type of stuff, and that becomes a vicious circle, because as soon as you get paid, the first thing you do is you go out and buy, because literally tomorrow, the money's going to be worth less. And so that creates this vicious circle of, instantaneous demand, people, wanting to buy today because they know they're going to get less tomorrow. But Fujimori implemented some very severe austerity reforms that it was pretty tough medicine, but it worked miracles. And it sounds like the Argentine president is doing the same thing. And, he needs to be commended for that. And hopefully the hardship that has caused will eventually be worked out, because let's face it, that medicine has gone down pretty hard for a lot of people, and it's necessary, but, hopefully eventually, just like in Peru, the economy turns around and people recover.
Yeah, austerity measures work pretty good, and I don't say work pretty good, but they really did help stabilize Greece. Spain still hurting. I don't think they came out with austerity measures, but I don't if I remember correctly, Spain didn't really enforce too much of it. But Greece did, and yeah, it was painful for them for a while. But now they're a pretty stable country economically.
Right,
It's not zigzagging, going. They're
right,
pretty because they did what they had to do. It was
right,
painful. Nobody liked it.
right.
But sometimes you just need that bitter medicine, and I feel like that's what's coming for us. But I don't think it's coming in the. And I'll let you go. I don't think it's coming in the way that most Americans think. So
Right,
when they hear
right,
draconian cuts, they think grandma out on the street dying, kids standing in bread lines. They just get this horror picture of like other countries
right.
where you may remember. I wasn't around, but stagflation of the 1970s.
Of course. God, that was
That
awful.
that's what's coming for us. It's not the decline or the pain isn't going to look like it did in Asia, Europe, and lots of South America. It's going to be stagflation.
It could very well be because, I'm not a big fan of tariffs, for example, at all. And this risks the possibility of not only causing inflation, but also causing job losses
Yes.
and which is the worst of all world, where you're losing jobs and your prices are going up. Because usually, obviously, conventional economics is when the economy goes into a recession and you have fewer jobs, have less
Yes.
demand, inflation should go down. But we had that terrible, awful situation that we had in the 70s, and we almost had it recently. Over the last after the pandemic, there was a lot of worry that we could go into that too. But I think though that the issue, the really fundamental issue, is that as long as our politicians are putting their own careers and their own partisan interests first, that it's going to be very hard to really solve our problems. And, which is why I am in favor of getting rid of reelection, because you have people who are going to go in there once, just one term, no chance to get reelected, no chance to run for another office while you're serving. And they can make the tough decisions based on facts, not based on, is that going to get me primaried? Or is that going to cause our party to lose seats in Congress? Those should not be considerations. Think of what are the ideas, exchange the ideas, come up with the best ideas, and take action. It's as simple as that. There are no political considerations here. And how many times have you heard, for example, such and such politician is not up for reelection, so he can vote his conscience? And you're thinking, well, shouldn't they kind of always vote their conscience? Shouldn't they always do what they think is best instead of what they think is going to help them politically? And that's what I think the fundamental reform is that we need to take here. There are a whole bunch of different ideas for economic reform, and we should hear all those ideas, even though the wild ideas. Sometimes a very bad idea is inspiration for a good idea. But let's have a free flow of ideas, and let's have political considerations taken out of the picture. And I think that is the formula for really moving forward. Because as long as our politicians, like as I say, are putting their own political careers first, their own partisan interests first, and the interests of the special interests that help keep them in power first, things aren't going to dramatically improve. In fact, they will probably get progressively worse, especially as the tribalism in our country just gets ever more vicious. Our democracy is just not functioning, and people detect this. And this is why you hear people now even saying, no, I'm in favor of fascism. People literally saying that. I'm in favor of an autocracy. And I
That
mean, literally.
from a lack of proper education in our country.
Well, what people don't understand is that autocracies, or maybe they have always proven to be the most wretched form of government. Might sound like, oh, yeah, we're going to have this tough guy come in and kick butt and put everything. But the problem is that once they have the power, they're not going to relinquish it. And the more power you have, it always happens. You become more paranoid and you become more vicious. And, going down an autocratic route would be completely catastrophic for us. But why are we even talking about this? It's because people are frustrated with the fact our democracy isn't working. And why isn't it working? Because of our politicians. It really is that simple. It really comes down to just that.
When it so kind of you're talking about that always leads me to think a little bit about before I go on to the next part. Is that I forget which founding father it was, but they believe that every generation should revisit the Constitution. We should have a constitutional convention every generation or two
Mm-hmm.
generations, however you want to call it. And I feel like if we had something like a mechanism of some sort like that, right, in our Constitution, would we be in the spot we're in now? Because I feel like at that point, it would force our government to, a lot of the public pressures and the things that you and I feel would be impacted a lot faster.
Well, yeah, see, the thing is that, yeah, the founding fathers made it purposely difficult to change the Constitution. But, and now it's virtually impossible. But why is it impossible? It's because we have so much mindless tribalism and we have so much
Yes.
misinformation. See, I believe that if you give people, you talk to them straight, you give them the facts, the people have a common basis of facts to make decisions, you exchange the ideas and you vote on them, things can change. And even constitutional amendments can happen in a fairly good clip, which is important, I think, because situations change, the country changes. We got to have the ability to modify that document as needed, when circumstances change and we need to make certain changes. And that can happen, I believe. But what's the key? You've got to get the emotion. You've got to get the misinformation out of the way.
Yes.
What if our politics should be a competition of ideas based on facts? Instead of that, it's a game of emotion manipulation based on lies. I mean, that's what it really comes down to. All our elections are not about ideas and vision. They're about which candidate or which party does the best at stoking up the emotions with misinformation. And that's
Right.
not that's not how democracy should work. I'll repeat, a democracy should be a healthy competition of ideas. That's what we want. But we don't have that now. But we can make that happen. And the first step, number one, as I say, you get rid of reelection. Number two is you've got to have ramifications for lying. If Joe, if you're interviewing me for a job and you catch me lying during the interview, you have every right to kick me out of the interview. And that's how it should be. If we catch our candidates for office lying, they should be kicked out. I mean, lying to the electorate has to be considered a violation of the sacred trust of elected office. If you get an office because, like George Santos did, from just lying, you should be kicked out of that office.
Yes.
Just like if I were your employee and you caught me lying on the job, you'd have every right to fire me. And that's how it should be with our politicians. In fact, it should even be a higher bar. You'll be given a warning once or twice, but if you get caught continually lying, you'll be removed from office and penalized. And so
I
that's
guess I guess what the difficulty for that would be is how do you enforce that, and who would be the one that sets the rules?
Let's take a quick break.
Quick break. If you love what you're hearing, head to patreon.com/the middle ground Mike. Just $1.50 unlocks bonus content and keeps us going strong for years to come.
Well, I mean, just like in the case of George Santos, it would be, the rest of the Congress, puts this person out. And, that's how it has to work. But the thing is that when somebody is running for office and they are, lying constantly about what they've done in their life or what what their opponent stands for. I mean, when you watch political ads, I mean, aren't you kind of just sickened by just these stupid attack ads that just make
Yeah,
somebody look like,
it just gets pointless because I'm like, well, I want to know what we're going to do to get better. It's like
yeah,
I tell people who work for me, I say I can find a crew person or a customer to tell me what's going wrong. What I need
right,
from managers are solutions. You get paid more to
exactly.
fix problems, not to point out the obvious.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, just the over the top lying about people. For example, calling judges communist or Marxist. And as somebody who's lived in a Marxist country and have seen the horrors of communism, I just when I hear Stephen Miller saying we're going to not allow our schools to teach our kids communist ideology, I just think, God, that's just sickening. There's nobody teaching communist. Nobody has a book of Marx and Engels teaching the kids communism. It's what, during the Chinese Cultural Revolution, I don't know if you're familiar with that, it was a terrible time in China's history. The insult that people would use if people weren't 100% on the Chairman Mao's, platform, let's say, they would just automatically call them imperialists. Well, that's sort of how it's become now with our politics. If you're not 100% on with President Trump, you're labeled a communist. Participate a lot on Twitter, now X, and you just give an alternate opinion, and people just start calling you a Marxist, a commie, and it's just people just it's just like it's insane. It really is, and I always respond with civility and respect because I'm not going to go down into an insult slugfest with these people. But I just ask them, Do you even know what communism is? Have you ever lived in a communist country? Have you ever been part of a family that has suffered under communism? And most of these people have no idea. They just know it's a automatic insult for somebody who doesn't agree with them. But I'm not quite sure how we got off on that tangent. But I guess I guess it's about attack ads. Where they just say anything. And the other thing we have to do is to encourage our voters to become more familiar with the issues. And there are ways to do that, which I proposed. And the final thing one of the most important things, which I'll make this very brief, that we have to really reform is our journalism, because our
Yes.
journalism is to our politics as policing is to social order. If you have weak policing, criminals will take advantage to behave with reckless abandon and impunity. Likewise, if we have weak journalism, politicians will lie with reckless abandon and impunity because they want to control the narrative. There's nothing more than a politician wants than to control the narrative. And when we have weak journalism, we can't counter that. And we need to take, if you consider that, if you think that the pen is mightier than the sword, our journalism should be the equivalent of our national defense, because our journalism protects us from enemies both within and without. And without solid journalism in our country, getting our journalism robust again, our country will be this chaotic, what we have now, this chaotic misinformation fest that we have now, people just believing what they want to believe, and there's no set of common facts, which is crucial for democracy. So that's another thing I proposed, is some ideas to make our journalism robust again, because it's crucial we have that.
What a lot of people don't know is a lot of our news companies in this country, like our CNNs and all things of that nature, they're not actually registered news companies or anything. They're actually registered entertainment
Well,
corporations.
that's exactly what it is. It's
And
exactly
so,
what it is.
because when they do that, they have a wider range of how they can bend the truth, per se. You know what I mean?
Well,
They
yeah,
can take the straw and somehow turn it into a nuclear weapon project. And that's
yeah.
my I had a friend who he did back end advertisement repair for one of the big media companies, like cable company, I should say. And he goes, the reason why they do things the way they do them is so that they can, obviously it draws more viewers, and they can, like I said, they can stretch the truth on a lot of items, and they can just they can twist it it's why you can go on, here's the best way, but you can go on CNN and read the same story one way, go to the CNN opinion page, and it'll have completely different facts in the same issue.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I think what's really important to point out is that, in the old days, to start a news organization required massive investment. If you wanted to start a newspaper, you had to have a printing press, you had to have reporters, you had to have an advertising department, you had to have a way to distribute the papers, to collect the subscriptions. Starting a television network or radio network was a massive investment. But now anybody with a laptop and a web page can start a quote unquote news site. And so the conventional revenue model of news has broken down. So how are these large news or quote unquote news organizations responded? They become entertainment. They become emotion manipulation channels. They basically exist to manipulate and stoke the emotions of the viewers, because getting feeling this daily surge of rage because of the news you're hearing is actually quite addictive. And there was a former Fox News host who wrote a book on it. I think his book was called Foxtocracy or something like that, where basically every morning they would say, what's the most emotionally provoking news story that we can broadcast today? The idea was to get people to stoke their emotions. And that's what has happened with our news channels, by and large. There's some exceptions, but by and large, they become basically entertainment channels, as you said. And we've got to get back to our news channels our news sources being reliable. And we have to also take measures to make small town journalism, great again, because small town journalism is crucial to keeping the community together, but also to finding corruption at local government levels.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, no doubt. So you've obviously got a lot of experience worldwide that probably most people in our country will never have. And it's not a knock towards anybody. That's just, it's been your life. So what about your experience abroad? And obviously, you've created the Solutions Party, but what about that experience from everywhere can kind of apply to the the American experiment, if you want to call it that. Like, like, so you take those fundamentals, right? Because every country's going to be different. It's just the way it is. Cultures are different. How do you integrate those things with what you know about America and make it something that's palatable to the electorate?
Well, the thing that's common with the democracies that I've seen is it's a common weak point that I've seen, whether it be in South America or in Japan, a little less so in Japan, but even here, and it's best summed up by what Winston Churchill said. The best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. And that's really crucial because whether it be here, whether it be Peru, whether it be Japan or other democracies, too many times the voters are not well enough informed to make informed decisions, smart decisions. So I've tried to make some, based on that experience, I've tried to make some proposals to encourage people to get informed on things. And one of the ways is one of the ideas is you would even have quizzes. And if you get a certain score on the quiz, you get, we could have the government, for example, if you get a certain score, you have a list of goodies that you can get. For example, you get from the government could offer free passes to the national parks, discounts on Amtrak. Apple could offer, this would be tax deductible. They could offer, gift cards. Starbucks could offer. So if you get a high enough score on your test, on your quiz, and you can take the quiz multiple times, but it would be getting rid of all the political nonsense and really, okay, this candidate stands for this candidate stands for that, and you take this quiz, and if you pass this quiz and you get a high score, you get access to these goodies, because I think that you've got to give people an incentive to learn what the issues are and what the candidates really stand for. So this is a common weakness that I see all over the world, and that from that experience, that's one of the things that I have tried to address with these ideas. And these ideas, by the way, it's not take them or leave them. This is all open for discussion.
Right, obviously.
Challenge me. This is what democracy should be all about. If you think my ideas could be improved upon, great. I'm all ears. Okay, and now the other thing is what I already talked about earlier is journalism. And journalism, has to be robust. It has to be reliable. It has to be something that people believe in. And so what I proposed is that just like we certify doctors, we certify lawyers, we certify database engineers, we certify truck drivers, we have to certify our journalists, and we have to certify our news organizations. You certify them, but you also give them a grade based on a number of parameters, like how neutral are their articles, how well written are their articles, how pertinent are their articles, a whole range of different things. And so you give them a grade, and if their grade falls below a certain level because they're constantly biased or whatever, or they're poorly written or they're not pertinent, then they lose their certification. And the good news is if you're a certified journalist, you graduate from college with a journalism degree, you'll automatically be qualified for a stipend, which will come from a national press fund, which people can contribute to, the government can contribute to, corporations can contribute to, so that people can then study journalism again and do a journalism career and make a decent living without having, for example, the money coming directly from the government, because then you're going to be worried about writing an article critical of the government and having your funding lost, or being dependent on a certain billionaire contributing to you. And so it comes from this national person. And this is especially important now with all of the deep fake AIs. For example, AI stuff that can be generated. For example, if somebody makes a fake AI video of you, Joe, doing something really awful, breaking into a jewelry store or something, the question is going to be, okay, was that video posted on a certified news site, or was it posted on Joe Sixpack's World News website?
Right.
This is going to be incredibly important as AI becomes increasingly hard to detect. What's real, what's not. Did this person really actually say that? Did that person actually do that? And so if the stuff, if this content is posted on a certified news site, you have much more confidence that they've done the research and have deemed it to be legitimate. But if it's not on a certified news site, then you can pretty much write it off as just being a fake. And this is so crucial to why we get certified news sites and certified journalists. So that's based on my experience with journalism and seeing the problems that people around the world have when it comes to our journalism and lack of faith in thereof. And it's going to increase as AI becomes more part of our everyday lives. We need to have this sort of certification process. Now, some organizations are going to say, well, we're proudly not certified, and that's their right. Well, you can start a news site that's not certified and publish all the news you want, fake as it may be. You're not taken away from free speech. You're just not going to be certified. And so, yeah, you can lie all you want on your own website. You can start a news organization that is just entertainment based on lots of misinformation and lies, but you're not going to be certified. And so, if you hear a story on that type of non-certified, yeah, it's going to be like Weekly World News. Remember the old Weekly World News
Yeah,
stuff at the
yeah.
shop, about Satan escaping from hell, and
Oh yeah. Like
Clinton
what was it
abduct.
called back then? The Inquirer, the Sun.
Well, yeah, there was one even more wild. It was wilder called Weekly World News, and they would have
Yeah.
stories like Clinton abducted by aliens, stuff like that. Yeah, you can publish that stuff, but it's just not going to be certified. We're not taking away your free speech, and so that's another crucial aspect I think that we need to reform: our journalism, our politics, our political parties, and some of the other things I've mentioned.
Diving deeper into a little bit of that, right? So how would like, a solutions party thing would be to protect, so, the certification process, right? Obviously it's a great idea. I think, we should have that because we have that for licenses, right? But
Mhm.
how do you protect? So obviously, like our current president, right? Love him or hate him, there's certain things that he goes after and he gets rid of. How do we protect that certification process from the swing of public opinion that happens depending on the crisis?
Well, I think you have to have a certification organization like this, like the Society of Professional Journalists, for example, something that's independent from the government and that it relies on multiple donations. So it's not subject to the whims of some rich guy like Jeff Bezos. And so you have to have a certification. But and when it comes to the grading, though, I think you have to have sort of like a Rotten Tomatoes like model where you have a combination of AI programs and even professional graders, journalistic graders. And then so, you get a whole bunch of this AI program rates this journalism, this journalist as grade A because of this, and this parameter. This AI program gives him a C plus because of this, and this. This evaluator, he gives him a B. And this way you get an average score based on multiple different types of evaluations, because you can have these evaluations automated through AI, multiple AI programs, not just one AI program, but an AI program that's been approved by this organization that, usually gets it right. You don't want it to always be exactly the same, all these AI programs, but you don't want to have some saying F and some saying A. You
Right.
got
Well,
to have.
right. Well, that kind of goes back to I think I had gotten an email. I had signed up for pod status. It's just to try to, obviously you're curious where your podcast is at, right? So it sent me an email about a week ago saying for the month of July so far, I was like number 36th in the United States for news commentary out of all
Wow,
podcasts. I was sitting there, I'm like, really? So I'm like,
that's
is
a
this, at first I had to like, is this thing like even legitimate? You know what I mean? So then,
right.
yeah, I mean, pod status is a real thing, so I signed up for it and I was like, oh, okay. So they monitor like downloads, and somehow, even though I don't have a ton of downloads in Europe, I was ranked one of the higher ones in France.
Really?
Top
That's
50 in France.
great.
I have no idea, and I've never spoken a lick of French in my life outside of Bon Voyage or whatever, like,
Yeah, right. Bon
you know,
appetit.
right outside of that. And I'm like, well, hey, well, I said in one episode, I was like, thank you to the French.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's great.
because it's the middle ground is about trying to take things like the Solutions Party, the Democratic Party, the Republican Party. And like me personally, I think like, okay, let's say you took the current system, right? I feel like the best people to be on any budget committee would be libertarians. Even if
Mhm.
even if they still had to honor what Congress passed, they would be a lot more quicker to prevent fraud and to prevent overspending and driving us further into debt.
Mhm.
But they would honor their commitments. Where they draw a problem at is even kind of like in relation journalism is, like you have a system like Social Security. You can't just like go in and just wipe it out and be like, okay, everybody gets a refund check, call it a day.
Mhm.
Kind of like what Australia did, and Joe
Mhm.
Jorgensen, she was the candidate
Mhm.
4 years ago, whatever, 5 years
Mhm.
ago, whatever it was now, is they phased out like their version of Social Security. A lot of it went towards like a private thing. And you had the option, if you were over a certain age, to stay with the current system.
Mhm.
Then if you were young, you automatically went into the new system. They kind of did it based on an age range.
Right.
And they're finding that people now, that when they started that process back then that are retiring now, are getting significantly higher retirement payments
Mhm.
than they would the other way around. So it's like, but the problem with our government is my dad told me this, and it's and it's the ruling to this day. The Social Security tax is just an income tax. That's all it is. It's not
Of
an
course.
actual retirement tax. It's
Right.
a new way of slapping an income tax hike on there, and then but they put a pretty name on it to make everybody feel better.
Right.
And
Right.
what
Yeah.
and what a lot of people don't know is before, I believe Clinton's the one who really started pushing it. They did it before, but how he was able to get a surplus, I do that surplus because the
Right.
debt was
Sure.
still going up, is he redefined what was debt.
Right.
So the obligations to Social Security and Medicaid and things like that are no longer considered debt to our government. So that's how they're able to say that they had a surplus.
Yeah.
But that's
Yeah.
also why you're seeing rapid inflation, deterioration of value of the money, because, well, somebody's still got to pay those bills, whether you consider it debt or not. And so instead of, we have 38 trillion dollars in debt,
It's
38 trillion, I
horrible.
think.
It's horrible.
But
Yeah.
if you look at the liabilities and obligations we have, we're well over 100 trillion. When
I
if I
can believe it.
remember
Yeah.
correctly, if you got like if you all the population, you combined it all, and
Mhm.
and that's wild to me.
Uh,
Like, and that's where like kind of like certification for journalism coming in, right? Like, how come journalists don't talk about that? Because if the American public wanted to know,
yeah.
if the American public truly wanted to know why they're struggling financially, a journalist that had a lot of like muster, like a Bill O'Reilly, somebody like that, right? Like if they were really digging into it, somebody that could really get the juice out there and people would listen, they would
Right.
talk about that, because it's like this key thing, well, it seems so pointless, but the fact that the media doesn't report on it is hurting people's livelihoods. They just don't even see it.
Right. The whole issue surrounding national debt is just tragic. It's awful. We're spending how much? We're spending almost like $1 trillion a year now just on interest.
Right.
And we've been told since the '80s, since the Ronald Reagan, well, these tax cuts are going to pay for themselves, but they never have paid for themselves. And in fact, what we've seen is a deterioration of the middle class. It's gone down by about 20% since '75, and we've seen the ultra wealthy uh, having an increasingly large portion of the overall wealth. And so, I think that we have to really reform our tax, the way we do our taxes.
We definitely need to go more towards, I don't want to call it a VAT system because that just sounds socialist because of where it originated, but something that more along taxes things on based on the choices you make, not your
Right,
ability to go to work.
right, right. I agree. I think that I know national sales tax is not a popular idea and for good reasons, but I think that something could be worked out where you have something similar to a national sales tax where people on limited incomes, that would be moderated somewhat. But I think also, I haven't actually thought about this in a lot of detail. It's something I want to write about at some point. Having a tax system where it's called like encouraged trickle down, where, okay, we're going to tax the rich at a higher rate unless they take some of their wealth and invest it in a way that directly creates jobs and increases their wealth, by the way. You want the rich to get richer. But what's the true success of trickle down? The true success of trickle down is when, yeah, the rich are getting richer, but the middle class is growing and the percentage of the overall wealth that the middle class owns is getting larger. And we don't have that now. And so I think that, well, if you tax the rich at a higher rate than we are now, but you give them more choice about how to, in fact, they can directly decide how they're going to use that money, how they're going to invest that money in America. It could be in making jobs, starting companies. It could be investing in energy infrastructure, in educational infrastructure, and they get a tax credit for that because you don't want, nobody likes the thought of tax, 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 but right now it's not fair. Right now, the ultra rich are not paying their share, and that's reflected in our debt, in our national debt. And so, but how do you solve that? Well, I think there are two fundamental ways to solve this. And the most important way is to get our politics working for us. That will lead to our economy working better, widespread prosperity. There are lots of ideas to make our country prosperous in a widespread way, not just in the big major cities like LA and New York, but even in the rural areas. We want prosperity to be widespread. And once you get wider spread prosperity, you're going to get more tax revenue, and that will help bring down the deficit. But in parallel to that, you want to have a system where you are getting more, you're encouraging the rich to invest directly into things that benefit the middle class, like I say, energy infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, educational infrastructure, or even creating, venture startups, more venture startups, maybe riskier, but they still will create jobs, at least temporarily. And who knows, some of these might actually lead to some great breakthroughs in technology or different types of new services.
Yeah, no, and I mean that's a great thing. So we've talked a lot about, kind of like obviously the journalism thing is because I think we both agree that impacts so much of like I mean it really covers politics A to Z really when you
Mhm.
break it down, right? Because somebody's got to talk about it, and that's essentially journalism to a degree. Obviously, if you're a professional journalist, that's a little bit different. But how does that like, so like your experience, like the movement of the Solutions Party, obviously, but something that you're trying to get, I believe you said registered as a nonprofit. How do you take that from where it's at? Because I guess like the ideals you have kind of cross both party lines depending on the angle. So to me, it's kind of in that aspect similar to the libertarians a little bit, but except it actually has solutions in there and not just talking about what it hates, you
Right,
know,
right.
and that's kind of where that party struggles. There's not a whole lot
Mhm.
of solution, just says get rid of everything, government's bad. Well, that's
Right,
fine,
right.
but there's a lot of people who can't afford that situation, so you're going to be hard pressed to get them to vote for it.
Right.
And the biggest thing is I think you were talking like 12 years per political party, right? So
Exactly.
how do we change that mindset to get people in the mode of going, okay, this is what we want, you know what I mean? Because people are going to want it to be streamlined, you know what I mean? So
Right,
it's something that just like so in my business, I tell everybody, if you want things to change, it's got to be a habit and it's got to be a routine. So,
right.
and that is like the tried and true method of any culture situation, how do you make that happen? Because there's a lot of good things in the Solution Party. How do we get that influence out there?
Well, I think that, the good news is, which is, I guess, I don't know, if good news is the way to put it, is that people are sick and tired of what we say. I think they're sick and tired of both parties. I think they're sick
Oh
and
yeah,
tired of our politicians. I think they're sick and tired of our democracy not working. I think they're sick and tired of how our economy's been going. I mean, who can afford to buy a house anymore? Rents are ever more expensive. Utility bills are going to be more expensive. Who can send their kid to college anymore? And even if they graduate from college, it's not like they've got six-figure jobs just waiting for them as soon as they graduate. And I think people smell a rat and are fed up. And that's one of the reasons why we have this extreme polarization that we're seeing, because people are not happy with how things are. And when people are disgruntled, wily politicians will use those disgruntled emotions to their, what's the word I want, to their malevolent benefit. And that's exactly what we are seeing. And so people are fed up. People recognize that neither one of our parties have any ideas. It's always the same thing. What it is, it's basically like the foundation of the house is crumbling, but we have one party saying, no, we need blue curtains, and the other party saying, no, we need red curtains. No, what we need to do is to shore up the foundation of our democracy and really get it working for us. Because once we get it working for us, we'll get the free ideas flowing. Yeah,
yes,
let's hear the libertarian ideas. Let's hear the liberal ideas. Let's hear the socialist ideas. Let's hear all ideas. Let's not demonize anything, because sometimes, like I said, a bad idea is actually an inspiration for a great idea. And so let's get the ideas flowing. Let's vote on the best ideas and let's move forward. It's that simple. Exchange the ideas, vote on the ideas, move forward. Politics and all this partisan crap out of the picture. So that's, I really think that people are eager to hear new ideas. And
yes, they are
I think people are also kind of sick of all this disgusting polarization that we see. This
big time,
mindless,
big time.
this mindless,
It's awful.
um, yeah, and people, you can't. It's like I say on X. You try to engage people in a civil conversation, and it's just like people go into insult mode.
Yeah,
I
instantly.
mean, yeah, and that's not the hallmark of a great country.
Yeah, I I go back to I have a good friend. His name is Don. Well, I mean, we'll just say that for purposes. He's a die hard to the bone MAGA supporter. Trump, I mean, Trump can do no wrong, right? So I was like, I just didn't really like the way Trump handled the January 6th thing, da 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 da.
Right.
He's like, well, you're a liberal. And I'm like, why? Because I think do I think he planned that situation? No, but I think he was quite okay seeing how it was going to play out. I think that is definitely because he's an opportunist, right? So you see an opportunity that these people might actually do something. Let's see what happens. And
Yeah,
because that's the only way it can make sense that you wait 3 hours to say anything about it.
right,
You're waiting to
right.
see how it plays out. And then on top of it, to be fair to him, though, he did offer police protection the day before, and the
Hmm.
Capitol said no, and Pelosi's representative said no.
Hmm.
So, and then I believe that the FBI had technically 3 or 4 informants, but they had
Hmm.
like 20 something people linked to those informants all in that crowd. And then you're just kind of going, something just doesn't add up here.
Hmm.
Like, was
Right.
this thing a ploy, not even necessarily by Trump, but by multiple circles or whatever, to try to break something so that they could,
What-
you know, push their influence with, look what happened. Now we got to push our reforms to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Well, yeah, you see, but this comes down to the very fundamental problem. Nobody knows what the truth is anymore.
Yeah.
If a democracy, if nobody knows in a democracy, if nobody knows what the truth is, the democracy is not going to function. And the big thing it gets this allows our politicians, our reelection obsessed, our power addicted politicians to control the narrative. And then you get some politicians saying this, other politicians saying that, and nobody knows what to believe. And this is why we have to have robust journalism. And getting back to your point earlier, is that, yeah, you say something that, now look, I just want to say, I know people who are, MAGA supporters, and I have the highest respect for them. They're good
Me
people.
too.
They want to see, I mean, they're bad apples in any political movement,
Yeah,
but
majority of
you know,
MAGA
the,
supporters just want to see America get better. That's all.
exactly. And they have different ideas, and we have to respect that. But unfortunately, at least in my experience, and this is not just, well, I'm not picking here on just on MAGA, I'm on the other side too, is that if you offer something that's not part of the group think, if you offer a different opinion, it's like automatically you're a commie or you're a liberal. No, I'm not a liberal. Not I don't even like those labels because what exactly is a liberal? What exactly is there? I've met very few people actually fit into one box or the other. Usually people have a variety of different points of view. And I've met some very conservative who are pro-abortion, and then I've met some very liberal who will defend the Second Amendment like any farm boy, whatever. And so most people don't fit into this liberal conservative box. And so let's kind of get rid of the labels. Let's welcome the different points of view. Let's look at the evidence and let's have a civil discussion. And then, we're going it's really that simple. But this tribalism, this viciousness that we're seeing now
Oh my
is
gosh.
exactly what the enemies of our country love.
That's
Putin,
what they want.
yeah, yeah, that's why we have the Russian, the Iranian, the Chinese trolls purposely stoking
Well,
these emotions.
I'm sure you've seen I had kind of made an AI video out of it. And the ironic part is depending which site I post the video on, right? Certain videos, like on certain platforms, like I posted one about the Tulsi Gabbard dropping the Russian collusion stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Went crazy popular on TikTok. Over 1,000 views. I've got like a bunch of comments. It just keeps growing. I think it's almost 2,000. It just keeps every day. It keeps growing. But then I put it on YouTube and it's got like 50. But then I did like a little Hulk Hogan tribute video, right? And that thing's got like 3,000 views almost. But then on
Right.
TikTok, it's got like 20. You know, but it was like the Tulsi Gabbard thing. Like people, so I put that on there, and people go, and this is not knocking anybody who commented on it, just in case they end up listening to this. They were like, I forget, one said communist, because I put that out there, or fascist, or you're a robot. Why did you have to do an AI? And I'm going, well, it was just kind of like, first, I love messing around with AI. I think it's a great tool as long as you use it correctly, just like a gun or a shovel, right? As long as you use it right, it's a great tool. So, I had put that out there, and there's just a lot of people that are going, oh, it's just a distraction from the Epstein files. I can get why people are saying that. Makes total sense. But to be fair, this is something that Tulsi Gabbard was talking about long before she was even in this position. And it's coming out. I haven't got to see and read any of the documents in complete detail or anything. But from what I have seen is, I think it's a far stretch to say Obama was behind it. But just like a lot of politicians, I think he was complicit looking the other way. So he has plausible deniability,
Mm-hmm.
because now
Right.
there's no actual evidence of Obama directly giving that order. It's just a lot
Right,
of circumstantial things linking to it. Well,
right,
but where a good friend of mine, Ray, had told me, he goes, "Where there's smoke, there's fire."
right, right.
So it just
Well,
it's
yeah.
goofy to me.
Well, the thing is also, sadly, if somebody wants to believe something, no matter how ridiculous, they're going to believe it. And
Yeah.
it's like if they want to believe that, purple leprechauns from Mars are running the world, they're going to believe it. And, you get into discussions with some people, and it's just very obvious that, they're never going to change. What I call it is it's like an emotional black hole. And,
Yes.
the concept of a black hole is that, once you're past the event horizon, you can never get back out of the black hole. Well, it's sort of like an emotional black hole where you have made such an emotional commitment to a certain belief that there's very little chance you're ever going to get out of that and consider a different point of view. Um, and this is again a result of the fact that people don't know what to believe, and so they get into these information agree fest silos where everybody just agrees, and anybody who even offers a little different point of view is automatically kicked out or mocked or insulted. And it's a real plague in our society right now, and it's a plague that is delighting the enemies of our democracy who want to see this great experiment in democracy end. I really, it's really clear there's a worldwide battle going on about it's the future of the world is at stake in terms of what are we going to are we going to go back to a time when nations were ruled by small groups of all powerful people like kings and emperors and dictators, or are we going to have nations ruled by the people, exercised either directly or through elected representatives? Democracy is a real rebellion to how it was throughout history, and there are a lot of powerful people who don't like democracy and would love to see it die, and I think are actively working to bring about its demise. And we must protect. We must start a counteroffensive that involves not only getting our democracy functioning here, but once our democracy is functioning here, other countries will be inspired. And we can, I say, let's work toward a world free of autocracies. And how do we get rid of the autocracies? It's not through cruise missiles and B-1 bombers. It's the same way we beat the Soviet Union, through an increasing freedom and prosperity gap. Because when the freedom and prosperity gap gets so great, the pressure on these wretched autocracies, whether we're talking about Russia, whether we're talking about Belarus, whether we're talking about China, will eventually break them. So let's get our act together here. Let's make our democracy function. Let's get our economy roaring, where we bring widespread prosperity. Let's encourage a free exchange of ideas, which is a big contrast to the autocracies, and we will crush them. And the last thing I kind of want to emphasize here, you talked about AI, and it's a great tool. But all technology has always been a double-edged sword. It can be used for good, it can be used for bad. And the autocracies in particular are going to use AI, like they're using it now increasingly, to monitor people, to keep them from challenging the established powers. And we don't want that. We want technology to benefit people, to make people freer, to make people more prosperous. We don't want technology being used by the powerful to put an increasingly strong stranglehold on power. And so that's another reason why we need a world without autocracies, because the autocracies will always use technology to increase their stranglehold on power. And they'll be the first ones to misuse technology, because they always are.
Yeah. And as we wrap up here, let's give the solutions party per se isn't just a concept, right? It's something you're trying to make a movement.
Exactly.
When people go to your website, I believe it's www.solutionsparty.org.
Yeah.
What would they find, and how would they get involved?
Okay, right now they're going to find a whole set of ideas. You can contact me through the web. On the website it has the email info@solutionsparty.org. Send me an email, share your ideas. Let's get organized. Maybe we can work together to get started nonprofits in other states, and then we're going to work on getting funding. I'm going to be trying to work this week on getting some funding to get it officially established here. And the thing I also want to emphasize, as I emphasized earlier, you don't have to agree with all the ideas on the website. That's not a prerequisite. The only thing that is required is that you have to be against reelection.
Yeah.
That's the fundamental idea. And we got to reform our political parties. That includes us. No, we're not going to be a life, 100-year, 200-year party. The Solutions Party will come to an end after a certain period because we don't want this to become tribal like the Democrats and Republicans or others. So yeah, share your ideas. I'm going to be implementing a donation link if anybody wants to donate. And I want to be, real crystal clear here that I will be publishing clearly what those funds are being used for. This is not about me getting rich at all. I want it to be extremely, it'll be certified by an accountant. The funds are being used specifically for these purposes, certified by an accountant. It's not going to be this I don't want people to think that this is some sneaky get rich quick scheme, because it's not. But we do need money to make things happen. It's just a fact of life. But I don't want ever to, for me, the most important thing in life is a person's trust. Because once you lose a person's trust, you never really get it back. Money comes and goes. But there's one thing I want to make clear is that I would never betray the trust of people who believe in these ideas. So
No,
that's that's what I'm working on now. Got to get some funding. Got to get organizations set up. And now everybody says, "Oh yeah, starting a new political party, that's just impossible." Well, I mean, if you just say, "Well, it's impossible, so we're not going to do it," then it is impossible. Maybe people say, "Yeah, you're just swimming up against upstream. There's just no way this is going to." I don't believe that. You've got to believe. You've got to move forward even when the odds are against you. And I think people are ready. I think the environment is ripe for some real ideas. Real ideas. I think we're so sick of these two corrupt, unproductive, dysfunctional
I think everybody
political
is.
parties who is just devoid of ideas, and people are frustrated, and rightfully so.
Yeah, no, and I get that. Evan, I thank you for being here. This is definitely, we can go back and forth, and we can definitely get like an even more in-depth
I'd love that.
interview. We could do that
Yes,
again. Yeah, I mean, just because there's just so much when you're talking about like a political party just in general, especially an up and comer, right? And I'm all about getting different ideas out there. So one of the big things is it's like finding the middle ground, right? Like, that's
exactly.
one of my big calls to action, if you want to call it that, is that's what it's about.
Exactly. Exactly. A civil exchange of ideas. And let's find, the thing is, in a democracy, people have always disagreed. They're always going to disagree. What's the key point is how you handle those disagreements. And in the old days, how did we handle disagreements? Well, we sharpened the swords, we sharpened the spears, and we went at it, and the best band of brawlers won. We eventually figured out that wasn't the best way to move things forward. The best way to move things forward is let's have a civil exchange of ideas and let's vote on them. It's that simple. And let's move forward. That's going to involve compromise. It can't ever be my way or the highway. You're not going to always get what you want. But if your ideas are really right, if they are in some fundamental way really correct, you can be assured that through the democratic process, they will prevail. That's the important thing. So if you have confidence in your ideas, you shouldn't need to lie about them. Just like if you're a salesperson and you're confident of the product you have or the service you're offering, you don't have to lie about it. You can talk about it truthfully because the quality and the utility of the product stands on its own. And that's exactly with how it has to be with ideas. If you really believe in your ideas, you shouldn't have to lie about them. You shouldn't have to lie to people about them. You shouldn't have to misrepresent what other people are saying. And so, yes, a middle ground based on a healthy civil exchange of ideas based on facts.
No, I agree. So, you know, I agree. Again, I think if your insights, and definitely your passion for challenging what is out there, because it's like I say when people say, "Oh, well, science says," I'm like, science may say one thing, but also let's remember the principles. One of the big principles of science, at least when I was growing up, it could have changed, is challenging everything that you see in front of you, no matter if it's been an established thing for a long time, because things change, our understandings of things change, right?
Of course.
So
Yes.
we have to, and I feel like everybody's afraid to challenge now because they're afraid of, I don't want to say offending, that's not the right word, but they're afraid of losing that person or losing that connection to someone, so they don't want to challenge them. And it's like we can challenge each other without being jerks.
Exactly. That's the exact thing. Let's not get into this agree fest stuff where we're just all telling each other how great we are and how our ideas are, because that's actually kind of in its own way very oppressive too. People get afraid. They get become a part of this group and they don't want They don't want to deviate, and it just becomes this vicious circle of agreement. But let's break out of that. Let's
Yes.
encourage positive disagreement, positive exchange of ideas. Somebody's got a different idea, they've got a different point of view. Well, that's great. Let's hear it. Let's let's respect it. Let's not go into insult mode and start calling people communist or fascist or whatever.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that, man. So wrap up here. To our listeners, everybody, hey, if you guys found this conversation valuable, share it, subscribe it, talk about it, get with people who are open minded. You're gonna have a hard time getting people who hate everything to agree on it, but I would encourage you, even if they want to come out and have a discussion, more power to them. They can go to www.themiddlegroundmike.com, and there's a spot on there where they can just book themselves now. So I changed my scheduling around. And then if you actually want some ideas for some solutions for our country, go to the solutionsparty.org/greateramerica.html and check it out, because it's not just about politics, right? It's about the possibility, the opportunities, and opening our eyes and getting rid of the anxiety.
Right. And I find that even some of the most stubborn people, if you engage them in a respectful way, you listen to them and you offer ideas, once you tone down the emotions, most people are actually willing to have a decent discussion. I mean, I've had people on Twitter, the first thing they do is, they send me F you, commie, all this stuff. When you engage with them, you break down and say that you respect them, and you don't say you not necessarily, but by engaging them in a respectful way, you showing that you respect them, and they many times they open up and will
Yeah.
be willing to talk to you about why they believe the way they do, and then there's some hope when you get beyond that wall of emotion, that knee jerk, commie, fascist, insult laden wall.
Yeah, it's rough. It is definitely rough. But okay, well, we're going to wrap up here, everybody. Until next time, I'm Joe. This is Evan.
Jaqua.
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 And this is the Middle Ground Mike, where our goal is to find the middle ground in a society of chaos. Hope this catches everybody doing well, and have a good day.